One of the few proposals for peace left remains Prime Minister Kamla Perssad's proposal to resume Dragon gas fields negotiations with Venezuela. This afternoon, I wrote a letter to Pdvsa and went into Caracas Pdvsa headquarters, directed to President Obregón to request consideration for such a proposal, which would be beneficial not only for Trinidad and Tobago, but for further expansion into Guyana, Suriname, Grenada, Jamaica and Cuba. Unfortunately, the response I received from Pdvsa was negative, as at this time they do not consider the project suitable. Trying to understand their side, I imagine that Pete Hegseth's announcement this morning while I was visiting Pdvsa, as he announced that another speedboat was shot on Venezuelan waters. And there was the highly provocative event of 5 aircraft who violated Venezuelan airspace, which was appropriately condemned by the Venezuelan Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Foreign Relations as a violation of Venezuelan sovereignty and violation of international law. The persons who are in favor of invasion against Venezuela are perhaps hoping that the Venezuelan military will become overwhelmed and respond with fire, which hasn't happened yet, as we are still seeking peace. This impasse between Venezuela and the United States must be solved by diplomatic means, and one of such diplomatic means is Marco Rubio's assurance that an OFAC license can be provided to Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela for exploration of Dragon gas field. The public opinion in Trinidad and Tobago seems partisan, where supporters of Prime Minister Kamla Perssad would like the Dragon gas deal to go through, while the opposition of Trinidad and Tobago would not like the Dragon deal to go through. And that reminds me, a similar toxic division existing in Venezuela, where supporters of Nicolas Maduro would like exploitation of oil and gas reserves under the leadership of Maduro's government, while the persons who are in favor for invasion would prefer the invasion to go through so that the petroleum company arrives into different hands and a new petroleum business, probably entailing privatization of the national oil company, would be their best choice, with the full support of the United States. It is my understanding that Kamla Perssad's proposal is assuming that the current Venezuelan government will stay, as she has publicly declared that it is not in her interest to promote a regime change in Venezuela. Certainly, both sides have been retrenching regarding convenience or inconvenience of invasion against Venezuela, and it looks like Pdvsa authorities would prefer to remain prudent until the geopolitical threats fade away. After being my offer letter of dialogues between Pdvsa and the Trinidad and Tobago government for expanding the Dragon gas field, I decided to head into the Embassy of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in Caracas. However, the security guard told me that the offices are closed on Friday afternoons, and he invited me to go back on Monday morning. I had previously written an electronic mail letter to the Embassy of Trinidad and Tobago earlier this week, which hasn't been responded either. It looks like both sides have a common interest, and there is no political will to end this war threat for the benefit of the populations and economies of Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, which have traditionally behaved as good neighbors. President Nicolás Maduro and Vice President Delcy Rodriguez on multiple occasions have stressed out that problems must be solved by dialogue. Therefore, I would urge the authorities of my home country, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, to reconsider their negative to speak to the government of Prime Minister Kamla Perssad. I am just a private citizen of Caracas. I might be able to offer to the Trinidad and Tobago Embassy when I go visit them next week to foster an intermediate cultural activity through Cine TV, Escuela de Cine y Televisión, which is my school of cinema and television, similar to activities we have already deployed with the Embassy of France, and resume conversations on Dragon gas deal after successful completion of such proposed cultural activity. Richard Grenell, Special Envoy of the United States to Venezuela, recently stated that building trust takes time when both parties are deeply hurt. The presence of Richard Grenell in negotiations for peace in the Caribbean and Kamla Perssad's proposal to resume the Dragon gas field with a Marco Rubio support for an OFAC license remain the only two verifiable hints from the United States that war could theoretically be aborted, while it is clear that the probability of war continues increasing and the probability of peace continues decreasing. Social media definitely are to blame. If the world escapes from this madness of simultaneous wars breaking out throughout the planet, if humanity averts war and resumes a path of international understanding and development through the usage of the tools provided by the United Nations Charter, much attention will have to be devoted to social media. I have been active in commenting events related to Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela during recent days, and I notice that there is a requirement from other Caribbean countries to have Trinidad and Tobago to behave exactly as they do, with the assumption that the people of Venezuela would not like the Dragon gas deal. It is unacceptable that people from countries that are not directly affected by the sanctions and lack of economic opportunities that Venezuelans are enduring ask Venezuelans to surrender our desire to develop our petroleum and gas resources. Venezuela has not proposed an alternative plan to develop Dragon gas field, and the infrastructure to link any possible gas extraction from Dragon into any remote destination would be prohibitively expensive, and the most cost-effective operation of Dragon gas field explorations goes through nearby Trinidad and Tobago, which boasts adequate processing liquefied natural gas infrastructure. My reply to people who are asking who will Kamla Perssad or her team visit when they come to Venezuela is that I personally am a private citizen who would be honored in meeting them and talking to them if they come to visit. I have studied geopolitical implications of oil and gas projects throughout this entire year 2025, since I started becoming interested in the topic due to the Chevron license issues. In many public opinion issues, I have sided with the opposition, and in other public opinion issues, I have sided with the government, because I am a free thinker and I resent having to constantly agree to any political party's will. At this time, I pledge my support to the Venezuelan government in preserving peace and in sovereignly operating our petroleum and gas facilities. However, I must remind Constitutional President Nicolas Maduro and Constitutional Vice President Delcy Rodriguez that in many occasions they have asked for foreign investment into Venezuelan oil fields as long as they abide by Venezuelan conditions. But to the credit of Prime Minister Kamla Perssad and her team, they should be given an opportunity to make their case to President Nicolas Maduro, to Foreign Minister Ivan Gil, to Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, and to Pdvsa President Mr. Obregón. Legacy statements from Prime Minister Kamla, which tended to be controversial, about the initial stages of the so-called war on cartels, initially sided with the United States position. However, we have seen a shift in her stance, as she is already conceding that she is not in the business of seeking regime change. And she has also stressed out that she would not make available the use of Trinidad and Tobago territory for an invasion to Venezuela. Her reference for the military positioning of United States military assets would only be in case that Venezuela enters territory administered by Guyana, which is the Essequibo dispute, which could also be a grounds for solution if Venezuela restores its relationship with Trinidad and Tobago. CARICOM, which is the organism uniting all Caribbean countries, is deeply divided, with Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaica on one side and the rest of the islands on the opposite side. The Caribbean needs to speak with only one voice. And if Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela are able to dialogue and discuss terms of Dragon gas exploration, bilateral tensions would be transformed into a bilateral victory that would be positive for the rest of the Caribbean Sea. At the beginning of this conflict, many observers from the Caribbean were requiring that peace should prevail. And now that we have an opportunity of Prime Minister Kamla's government and President Maduro's government dialogue and agree on mutual beneficial conditions for gas extraction, it looks like the public opinion of many Caribbean countries are biased towards resentment and escalation of communicational warfare rather than the peaceful and economic goals shared by the populations of the Sisters Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. We will continue monitoring how the relentless provocations initiated by the United States are not a cause for a situation where Venezuela would shoot first. Venezuelans in exile who are mostly in favor for invasion against the country are joking that the Venezuelan government and military are weak because they are not responding with fire to the United States provocations. Unfortunately, we must endure these jokes as we continue seeking peace. And certainly in my particular case, where I am again offering to the peoples and governments of Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela to do as much as I can to bring understanding between our nations, I will certainly not follow any path of provocation. While I reassert that the sovereignty of Venezuela should not be intruded, and I would like to thank the 53 countries that have held recent bilateral meetings with Venezuelan Foreign Minister Iván Gil, supporting Venezuela's push for sovereignty and end of colonialism. Foreign Minister Gil has been hosting in Caracas a seminar on decolonial enclaves that still exist in the continent, including the islands of Anguilla, Montserrat, Turks and Caicos, Guadeloupe, Martinique, US Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, Saba, Aruba, Curaçao, Bonaire, Saint Martin, Greenland, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, French Guyana, the Falklands. All these territories, including Puerto Rico, should become independent countries, and it will be a central strategy of Venezuelan foreign policy moving onwards that such independence becomes possible. However, we have also learned that independence requires economic development for your population. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela, we deserve to continue improving our gas extraction and processing industry. And together, we should become stronger. And the same goes for Guyana, which still needs alternative investment for their Stabroek fields and the building of a refinery in the Essequibo. Perhaps the repetition of these goals must continue until it becomes mainstream in the general public, which is of course quite difficult as communications tend to be prioritized by algorithms in social media that prefer promoting contents of war. Conflicts provide more likes, provides more views, and hateful reactions become viral, and that is perhaps an important cause why the world today is less secure and more prone to war than at previous times of history where algorithms of social media promoting war had not been invented yet.